Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live in Chrysler Arena here at the University of Michigan. That's the actual court they played on. This one-dimensional picture here is the actual court they played on. This is your goldenblack.com rap video following Purdue's 84-76 win over Michigan. Why am I standing out here in the concourse like a fool? I'm actually hiding from copyrighted music being pumped all through the arena. We went from the best of Kiss for a while to now we're in a montage of post-traffic, peak VH1 era Steve Winwood. So obviously YouTube does not like copyrighted material, so I'm hiding. I'm tucked away in a corner here in front of this one-dimensional picture of the court at Chrysler Arena for your rap video. Thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel for supporting this ridiculous babbling. As I always say, once there's a Purdue Club Hotel in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I will stay nowhere else. No pressure. So Purdue wins 84-76. I have to speak up because I can hear Steve Winwood again. And if I can hear it, you probably can too. 84-76, Purdue is now one win away from clinching at least a share of the Big Ten title. This was one that, Michigan's in last place. They are at the end of a very, very difficult season. Purdue is really, really good, and you kind of looked at this game in advance and thought it could get ugly. And to Michigan's credit, it never really got ugly. To Purdue's credit, they managed to keep Michigan at arm's length the entire way after they kind of separated themselves a little bit late in the first half. I think that this game was a reminder of just this Purdue team's consistency this season. I think every college team has a couple games a year typically where they just don't show up, or they're just cooked from a mental, physical perspective, whatever it might be. You remember Purdue's trip here a couple years ago when Purdue was a top 5 team and they just got absolutely boat raced here at the end of a tough stretch of games in a pretty short period of time. Purdue hasn't not shown up for a game this season. Purdue's lost games. Purdue's had spells of turnovers, and that's why Purdue has lost those games. But I don't think there's a game this year where you can look at it and say, hey, Purdue just didn't show up tonight. They just phoned that one in. I think that's a huge credit to this Purdue team and what has made them really, really good this year. I think that's another, I don't know what the opposite of symptom is. Byproduct. How about that? It's another byproduct of all the experience and all the maturity that they've gained since they were at this very moment 1 year ago. They've been very consistent all year. Doesn't mean they've won every game. As I said before, nobody wins every game. Everybody loses games. But they have showed up for every single game. I know that sounds like a backhanded compliment, but it's really not if you pay really, really close attention to college basketball. I think this was another illustrator of that sort of hidden baseline productivity with Purdue that I often refer to, and I really need to trademark a name for, but it's those elements that are kind of baked into Purdue's mix, kind of baked into their personnel, where on any given night this is going to happen and it is going to help you. First and foremost today was Purdue's offensive rebounding. That's not a constant for a lot of teams. For Purdue, it is an absolute constant. 17 offensive rebounds. Sorry, I don't have a printed box score. 17 offensive rebounds for 24 second chance points. That is the game. The game was decided at the end of the first half, but it was put away in the second half when Purdue had this run of taking advantage not only of their own hustle, but of Michigan's lack thereof, where Purdue missed back-to-back three-pointers. Purdue ran down the rebounds, got three-pointers off of those missed three-pointers. And then after that, there was an N1 for Ross-Ade that I think came off an offensive rebound. It all has kind of run together. But offensive rebounding put this game away, those long offensive rebounds. That's not really what you think of when you think of Purdue offensive rebounding. You think of Ross-Ade just throwing people around under the basket, and there was plenty of that too. But those second chance points and Purdue just maximizing its opportunities. It's the reason Purdue's one of the most efficient offenses in college basketball. It's the reason turnovers are so costly, because every possession you fritter away is not really one possession, but it's the equivalent of like 1.5 possessions, because oftentimes, half the time, you're going to get the ball back when you miss. Anyway, the offensive rebounding today was just absolutely dominant, as you know. That baseline productivity I always talk about, that I just started talking about, fouls are part of that, obviously. And in the first half, everyone had 2 fouls for Michigan, both of their big guys. For the second game, in as many meetings between Purdue and Michigan, both their big guys fouled out. Both of those guys, they were taking one guy with 4 fouls out, putting in another guy with 4 fouls. If it wasn't 4 fouls, it was 3 fouls prior to that. They were just from the opening minutes of the game, they just had a lead balloon around their ankles due to foul trouble. And, Purdue maximized that in terms of the personnel matchups. I don't think Michigan ever got forced into any lineups that gave Purdue problems. I thought coming in, had Michigan tinkered with some things where they put 4 guards out there with a couple guys who can shoot on the floor, that might have been something that could have given Purdue some problems. I don't think they ever did that. I'll have to go back and look at what their exact lineups were, but Michigan never really ran anything out there that was really problematic for Purdue. They made a lot of one-on-one plays. Doug McDaniel made some shots early, made some shots late when the game was more or less decided. Terrence Williams made some one-on-one jumpers. Other than that, I actually think, it was important for Purdue to get Terrace Reed in foul trouble, but was it really? Because Terrace Reed is not a shooter. And when Terrace Reed was not on the floor, they had Trey Jackson on the floor, and Trey Jackson made a couple threes. So I actually thought the whole Terrace Reed fouling out thing was kind of a backhanded deal for Purdue in terms of it helping it. Zach Edey, just, as I say often, and probably don't need to anymore, but probably ought to out of simple obligation, it is nice to have Zach Edey on your team, because this was that typical ho-hum 35 and 15 from Edey, where maybe it wasn't even so ho-hum, but he's just always there. I mean, he is the most consistent player I think I've ever covered at Purdue. Even when he's not good, he's still good. And very rarely is he not good. I think that he just changes every single game he's in. And, once again, 35 and 15, it's just another day at the office for him. And, again, I'll tell you again, I've been saying this all year, this is not normal. This may never happen again. And I have said that about I don't know how many big guys now at Purdue. Probably Juwan Johnson, although I wasn't doing videos at the time, thankfully. I was much stupider then. I was much less coherent back then. Caleb Swanigan, I'm sure I said this about. Jaden Ivey, I think he's not a big guy, but he's that caliber of player. These guys don't come along very often. It just so happens Purdue has had this unbelievable run of great players, and for as much as it's silly to write legacy before the whole story is told or written, I can't imagine there ever being a better, more impactful, more consistent player at Purdue than Zach Edey. This was like a best of game for him, a resume game for him, where if you just watch this game, this told you everything you needed to know about him. He not only put up 35 and 15, dominated the offensive glass, set the whole tone for what won this game for Purdue in terms of the second chances, things like that, but he scored in time at moments where Michigan had a chance to at least have a chance. And it was those threes off those offensive rebounds that really threw water on that, and it was a couple of end ones by Zach Edey too that did that. He really came up big when Purdue needed some plays. Michigan was starting to threaten to get within 6, 7, and get in that realm where anything can happen. When there's air in the ball and there's a bunch of teenagers running around on the floor, anything can happen. Zach Edey was the central figure in making sure that Purdue was not in a situation where anything could happen. This was a game that, as I said, Purdue really, really built some cushion late in the first half. I think that's when the game was decided. And then just had to hold them off, just had to not go into these rash of turnovers, just had to not take bad shots, just not do things that lose you games you shouldn't lose. And I don't think Purdue ever did that. That's a bit of a credit to Michigan. They have nothing to play for. This is a lost season for them. They just lost arguably their best player for the rest of the season to an injury. There's been inconsistency in them having their other best player, Doug McDaniel. Their coach started the season with a heart condition. He was a heart procedure, so he was out for a while. There was a kerfuffle, if you will, between the coach and the strength coach. It's just one of those seasons for Michigan where everything went sideways. And you have to give them credit for not losing this game by 25 points on their home floor. But you have to give Purdue, too, credit for making sure that this was never really in reasonable doubt in the second half. Again, that's the consistency I started this very video off by talking about. I don't think Purdue has ever really just not shown up. And that's really, really a mouthful of a compliment to pay any college basketball team, because everybody gets a couple stinkers a year. It's just the nature of the sport. It really is. But Purdue has been immune to that and deserves a lot of credit for it. So that's what I got from whatever room I'm in Chrysler Arena here in Ann Arbor, where the students and the faculty are on spring break in February. Part of the reason why, one other thing to talk about, part of the reason why this was the most surreal road environment I think I've ever seen goes back a little bit to some of the real old-time Northwestern games where they had no fans coming to their games, and Purdue people from Chicago and Northwest Indiana and whatnot would just fill up the old decrepit Welsh Ryan Arena. This was pretty remarkable, because this was, people say it's like a home game, but it's never really like a home game. I don't think anything is really like Mackey Arena, as loud as that place gets. But the percentage of people here who were rooting for Purdue versus Michigan, more importantly, the percentage of people whose voices could be heard doing so was overwhelming, and something that I just don't think you see very often in college basketball, in the Big Ten especially. I don't necessarily want to say that was a huge part of Purdue's win, but it certainly didn't hurt. I think Purdue was the biggest part of Purdue's win, but the kind of de facto support in the background certainly did not hurt. So that's what I got. So from Purdue's 84-76 win here at Michigan, putting the Boilermakers one win away from at least a share of the Big Ten title. This is Brian Neubert from GoldenBlack.com. Also, for that vacuum, thank you for watching, thank you for reading, thank you for listening, and thank you for processing our materials, no matter how backlit those materials might be. And thank you once again to the Purdue Club Hotel for your support. As always, we appreciate it. Check them out. So, thank you, everybody.